And then the second thing is, to your point, the Army started planning this long in advance because what we believe is this will continue the strength in recruiting and retention that we have as young Americans across the country get to see all of the amazing things that the Army has done, whether it's helping with floods in North Carolina or wildfires in California, or we talked to an astronaut yesterday who's on the moon, who's a soldier, including actually going to war and fighting to defend the freedoms that are that make our nation so great. We think this is going to be an incredible opportunity for the Army.
Well, as politicians debate building nuclear power plants in Australia, China is going one giant leap further. Chinese authorities announced they are prepared to make one on the moon. Science and technology correspondent Brent O'Halloran joins us live. Brent, this can't be a serious proposal, can it?
This is indeed something that China's space agency is keen on. That's according to a senior official there. This week, China has announced developments in a suite of space-related projects, including naming the next crew to head to its space station. Officials also discussed China's collaboration with Russia and 16 other nations and agencies on an international lunar research station, a permanent base on the moon. Now, Russia had mooted using nuclear to power the base, and Chinese officials have now backed that idea.
Facing a growing possibility of being hit with an asteroid.
Yeah, experts say the chances for such an attack are actually going up.
All right, meteorologist Audrey Prenti joins us now with what we need to know. Audrey, I guess better there than here, right?
That's true, Steve. NASA is tracking an asteroid big enough to destroy a city. Thankfully, it's not aimed at Earth. However, it could slam into the moon in less than a decade. NASA first detected asteroid 2024 YR4 late last year. Since then, scientists have been tracking its orbit. The latest data suggests a small chance it could strike the moon on December 22nd of 2032. That's about 7 years away. Estimated to be over 200 feet wide, the asteroid has been called a city killer because of the damage it could do if it ever hit Earth. Fortunately, our planet is not in its path. NASA says the asteroid has about a 4% chance of slamming into the moon, and if that happens, it could leave behind a fresh crater and possibly produce dust and debris. Now, here's a fun fact. The name 2024 YR4 isn't random. 2024 is the year it was discovered. Y means it was spotted in the second half of December, and R4 tells us it was the fourth asteroid in that discovery sequence. New infrared observations by the James Webb Space Telescope last month helped narrow the asteroid's path. Scientists say a strike won't affect the moon's orbit or life here on Earth. It would simply give researchers a rare chance to study a real-time impact in space. The last confirmed asteroid impact on the moon happened on March 17, 2013. It was the size of a football and left behind a crater of more than 60 feet wide. The impact was the equivalent of 5 tons of dynamite exploding. Now, in comparison, the asteroid 2024 YR4 were to strike the moon, the blast could pack the punch of up to 7 million tons of dynamite, enough to leave a crater visible from Earth through a telescope. So while we're in the clear here on Earth, astronomers say every asteroid we track actually teaches us more about protecting our planet. So good news that we're keeping an eye on this one.
That's pretty fascinating stuff. When you look at the surface of the moon, clearly it's been hit countless times. Shows you how long the whole cosmos has been here. Audrey, fascinating stuff. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
The chief designer of the lunar program told Reuters that he wants China and Russia to bring a nuclear reactor to the moon and couple it with a solar power network, and potentially do this as soon as 2035. Now, I spoke with a former rocket scientist about whether this is a wise thing to do and perhaps a risky thing to do.
You've probably noticed the moon is quite far away, so whatever happens on the moon stays on the moon. The issue comes from launching. You know, the one time that we had a nuclear reactor crash was when the Apollo 13 lunar module, which had been a lifeboat, came back to Earth and they threw it away. It landed way at the bottom of the ocean. They pulled it up. It was fine, and they used it again. So, you know, it depends usually what side you're on in terms of the nuclear argument. It's probably the launching from Earth where the most people get the most upset.
The Outer Space Treaty, which China has signed, prohibits nuclear weapons in space, but it doesn't explicitly ban nuclear power sources. Now, China wants to become a major space power. It's aiming to land astronauts on the moon by 2030. It's planned a mission in 2028 to lay the groundwork for a nuclear base on the South Pole. Eventually, it says 50 countries will be invited to work in that base. Now, compare that with the US, led Artemis program, which is aiming to have its astronauts on the moon by around 2027. Now, Chinese officials this week also accused the US of interfering in Beijing's attempts to cooperate with other nations on space projects. So all this, Holly, suggests there is certainly a fiercely competitive modern space race as two major powers battle in an area seen as the pinnacle of technological endeavour, Holly.
Officials are waiting for a status update from Japanese company iSpace on its second attempt to land a private lunar lander on the moon. The lander, named Resilience, was set to touch down this afternoon, shortly before it was set to land at 3:17 p.m. Eastern. The company's live stream showed Resilience rapidly dropping altitude. Communication with the lander has since completely been lost, and officials say they will provide an update at 8 p.m. tonight. It comes 2 years after the company's first attempt at this resulted in a crash landing. Leroy Chow joins us now. He's a retired NASA astronaut and ISS commander. Mr. Chow, thank you so much for joining us. What is the point of this mission? Can you tell us a little bit more about what they were trying to accomplish?
Sure. As you mentioned, this is the second attempt for iSpace to soft land a vehicle on the moon. This time they also had a European-built rover on board, and it was going to go do some interesting things. It was going to scoop up a sample of the regolith, or the dirt, which they already had an agreement with NASA to purchase for $5,000, kind of a symbolic gesture. But they had a number of other payloads and radiation detectors, things like that. And it would have been the third commercial lander to successfully land on the moon after Intuitive Machines on a partially successful landing 2 times, but then Firefly Blue Ghost successfully landed just a few months ago, had a complete mission success. So that's a big deal. NASA is going to rely a lot on these commercial partners, the so-called CLIPS partners, to help to explore the regions that we want to establish lunar bases and have humans, exploring in those areas. So unfortunate. It sounds like contact has been lost. It doesn't look great. I know we don't have official word yet, but it's just, it kind of underscores how difficult these operations are.
Yeah, we'll be looking ahead to that press conference at 8 p.m. Eastern to answer some of these questions about what exactly has happened. There's a lot we still don't know. But if it does turn out that this was a crash landing, how significant would that be as a second setback for iSpace?
Sure, and it's, of course, we need to figure out what went wrong. Was it the same thing that happened last time where sensors were confused and thought it was already on the surface and cut the engines down, or they were a little bit low on fuel as well, and, they ended up in a catastrophic failure? I believe the company has learned a lot from the past, the failure from 2 years ago, and so hopefully they've made a lot of changes. So I'm hopeful that this, latest issue with this lander is not the same thing. Unfortunately, the profile looks very similar, and the fact that the team observed the vehicle falling at a rapid rate just before they lost contact with it is not a good sign. But I'm sure they've got some good data they're going to be looking over, and my thoughts are with them. I know how disappointing this can be, and I want the commercial folks to succeed. I think they're an integral and critical part of our space exploration program. So there are going to be these hiccups, but let's keep pushing forward.
Yeah, we know that a lot of work went into this, but sometimes even a failure can still be a step forward.